Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us in today's webinar, Attracting and Retaining Talent in the Nuclear Sector, organized jointly by the European Nuclear Society and Thomas Thor. We are very pleased to discuss with you this very important topic, one of the most strategic challenges for our sector today. So how to attract and how to retain talent, considering the growing global ambition of the nuclear sector. I want to welcome our speakers. So we have Callum Thomas with us, CEO and founder of Thomas Thor, who will guide this conversation. And together with us also, we have Camilla Fiedler-Blackhammar, Director of Strategic Competence at Vattenfall. So we want also to hear from you. So we will have a short Q&A session at the end of each topic we will discuss during this webinar. So I ask you just to raise up your hand if you want to speak out, or just feel free to use the chat to share your thoughts and your experience. And with that, I would begin the webinar. So Callum, please, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you, Mattia. Hi, Camilla. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. So it's an exciting time, I think, for the workforce in nuclear. I think just reflecting over the last decade, the workforce topic has gone from being one of the side topics that's important in the sector to being a primary topic. So now it's interesting when you go to nuclear events now, the skills or the workforce or the people agenda is right at the top, which is great to see. But it's partly because of the growth in the sector, and it's partly because some of the challenges we're facing are people related, and that's where we need to address our attention. So here we are today, and I think there's quite a few people are joining, which kind of shows you the interest in the topic. The idea today, I'm going to share an agenda. We want this to be an interactive webinar today. So there are 4 topics. I think we've got an hour between us. We're not going to be late. We're going to be on time today. So we've got about 10 minutes or so for each, 12 minutes or so for each topic. So I'm going to introduce the topic and maybe talk about a few themes or developments in this area. And then Camilla is going to talk about the experience of Vattenfall and their lived experience or their initiatives in these areas. And then we'd like to open it up to the group. I think what's useful in this type of format is having some general information about the themes that we're seeing, mixed with some real examples of our peers in the industry, organizations, employers. How are we feeling things? And we've obviously got and how are we managing and dealing with the dynamics that are happening. And we've obviously got different people here from different organizations, different size organizations, different scopes, different countries, different cultures. So there are going to be some similarities, and there also might be some differences. So I think what I hope everyone gets from this is a high level view from me, from Thomas Thor, on what we see happening in the workforce. A lot of this is anecdotal, based on our experience and what we're hearing and seeing and understanding from our clients and from our networks all around nuclear. But I hope that you also come away with it with some real life ideas and examples of challenges others are having and how they're dealing with those, and successes that we're having and how we've made those happen. So it should be informative, but also useful. That is the idea. So we have 4 topics: how the dynamics of the workforce are changing and how we harness the benefits of those changes, what measures can be taken when recruiting to improve the chances of long-term retention, knowing that attracting people is one thing, but retaining people is another entire area of focus. talking about inclusion and diversity, which initiatives are succeeding and how do we boost retention when hiring people from underrepresented groups or from minority groups into the sector. And then we'll finish with opportunities for collaboration at the European level to attract and retain the workforce, and what are some of the limitations to that collaboration. So I'll spend a few minutes on each topic, and then we'll go to Camilla, and then we'll open it to the floor.
But maybe for your information, also Caterina Ratto, recruitment coordinator at Ansaldo Nucleare, joined us. So we'll share also together with Camilla some contribution from the point of view of Ansaldo.
Okay, superb. Okay, great. We really do welcome everyone to contribute here. So if you have a thought or an experience to share or a question you would like to ask, either put it into the chat, please, or use the hand up function. So because there's quite a lot of people, it can be a bit chaotic if everyone can come off mute whenever they like. So just put your hand up, and one of us will take you off mute to ask the question or to provide your information. So maybe a few words to get started. The growth in the sector is really real now, and it's quite good timing. We saw maybe many of you have seen the Nuclear Europe economic and social impact report that came out on the 5th of June, so literally last week, and it talks about around 884,000 direct and indirect jobs in the nuclear sector now in Europe, which will increase to somewhere between 1.3 and 1.7 million, depending on the growth scenario in nuclear. So it feels like we're moving from this intention or planning phase to the actual reality of the growth of the sector, and remembering that we still have a proportionately a higher proportion of people towards the end of their career in the sector. It's an aging workforce, basically. So we have to replace people that will be leaving the workforce, as well as providing the growth and hiring and retaining the people needed for the growth. That's all very well, but we also face competition, and there are a lot of sectors that are also growing, competing for the same engineers, project people, commercial people, leaders, not least defense. Defense spending is rising across the whole of the world, but especially in Europe, and that is going to provide an increased competition for the civil nuclear space. I think one dynamic that we're seeing is that retention is a bigger challenge for employers than attraction at the moment. It seems to be where the pain point is being felt. And we're going to come back to that in one or two of the sections. And knowledge transfer and capacity building are also more challenging because we're in more of a flexible working, remote working environment, and it's proving harder to train and develop people, and especially to transfer knowledge from experienced people. So let's go into a little bit more detail. Our first area is how the dynamics of the workforce are changing and how to harness the benefits of these changes. So maybe I can start with a few observations that I see, and then maybe Camilla, you can talk about what you're seeing in Vattenfall, which is a large employer in our industry. So the first observation I have is that the definition of mobility, global mobility, is really changing. We are seeing less permanent relocation and a lot more people, let's say, alternative deployment models such as remote work and hybrid work. It's interesting, actually. I was thinking the other day how the price of air travels has gone up a lot. And it seems one of the big factors driving that is that people are traveling a lot for work. Whereas people may have fully relocated before, there's now a lot more international travel between offices and colleagues visiting each other or clients. And certainly in our business, we often move people around the world, and we're seeing more people doing maybe 2 days in the office and staying where they are with their family rather than relocating permanently. That's quite a big shift. There's also, we see a tension between employers who generally want people to come back to the office, and employees who generally don't want to retain the flexibility that everyone has got used to. And it's interesting to read. You always read in the press that companies, some of the big tech companies have ordered people back to work. And I'm always interested by those examples, because those companies are in quite a privileged position in that people want to work for them so badly. If Apple, for example, says everyone has to come back from work to the office, they're probably going to have a better response than most companies. And the reality is that there is a tension, and the employer position is we need people together more, and the employee position is generally we need to retain flexibility. And the employers that are dealing with that well are retaining their staff. Those that are not are losing more people. That's the reality. I mentioned about knowledge transfer before. We see that as becoming more challenging. Transferring knowledge and developing people with the remote working and flexible working is more challenging. But then there's an opportunity there with tools and technologies that can support learning and knowledge transfer. And there's a general theme of people moving jobs more than they have done before. And this has been talked about for a while, but the loyalty kind of goes both ways. I think there are less organizations now offering highly attractive long-term pension programs and some of the golden tie-ins that you maybe have seen in the past. But also there's just a culture of people moving roles more often. So maybe every 2 or 3 years now rather than every 4 or 5 years. And as a result of that, there seems to be, and this is again from experience of listening to people, why people are leaving jobs, there seems to be less investment in professional development, because employers are thinking, well, if people are moving so often, can we really afford to, and do we really want to develop so deeply in their development? And seems to be a move towards more of a transactional relationship between the employer and the employee, more management on outcomes, and employees taking more ownership of their career development plans and their personal development plans, rather than their employers taking that kind of role which they have done in the past. So these are high-level things that we're seeing happening in the workforce right now. But maybe Camilla, Vattenfall is a huge employer. What are you seeing changing or happening?
Mm-hmm. I agree on the things you have said. We can also see those, and it's really exciting times right now, but challenging due to that. We have modernization, we have lifetime extensions, maybe new nuclear, we have AI coming, and also the new generation. So it's a mixture of a lot of things happening right now. So it's really important that the organization are good at changes, I would like to say. We need to follow the trends that comes now and so on. And we have very old facilities, so we can have 4 or 5 generations at the same time working together. And in 5 years, 1/3 of our employees in Sweden will be from Generation Z. So it's a huge things that happen now. And it's a real challenge sometimes to meet the need the younger people have, but it's also really good input for us. They come with new ideas, how to work with things, how you can make things more effective and in AI and so on. So our experience is that when we set together teams with young people and the older people soon retiring, it's a very good mixture there. But you can't leave them alone, so to say. You really need to have inclusive leadership and so on. So we are working, for example, with a new leadership program, a model. So because our managers, they are really key in this. In every question we will discuss today, the leadership is really key. So you need to have a really mature leaders in the organization. And you also need to think about how you communicate. Due to that, we set different sometimes what word means and so on. So that we have seen a couple of examples of. So it's really important to set time in those things. So you're really structured and clear in the organization. Another thing we notice with the younger generation is that they want feedback in another way, maybe on a daily basis and so on. The managers need to be more operative, so to say, in the organization. And that we also think is really good due to that. I mean, everyone needs feedback. So if we can have a continuous feedback culture, so to say, it's really good for the development. And I mean, a key here is also to work together, I would like to say. We need to, both internal Vattenfall, but also national Sweden and Europe and so on. It's really important to have this cooperation together to succeed in this coming projects and so on. So, and another thing, I don't know how long I can speak. I continue till you tells me stop. But that is also, it's easier now, as you say, to hire new people into the business. So we can see that nuclear has become popular today. And we have, for example, it's högspänning in Swedish. It's like a series called High Current, you can say, where young people can follow, and also from age 10, it's the target group 10 to maybe 20, can follow people in the daily work at Vattenfall. So after we started that series, all the places in our schools and so on that couples towards hydro and nuclear and so is filled with people. So it's very popular today to work in the sector. Then we come to the next factor later on, how to retain the people, so to say.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Camilla. It's interesting. So I was thinking as you were talking, you know, this change of the generations in the workforce. I just read a really interesting book around how to succeed in the multi-generational workforce. And you know, we have obviously the baby boomers to the Gen X to the millennials, and then the etc. And it was one of the things they were saying actually was you were saying about the more regular continuous feedback and flow of information. But so you in a company the size of Vattenfall, you've noticed that and actually made that shift in culture towards managers providing more regular, you know, constant feedback loops, because that's quite a change, right?
Yeah, it is. So I mean, we want to go to have this continually the whole time, not twice a year or something in a yearly conversation. It's really important. I mean, we also have managers in the field and such kind of things, but this is something more we need. We can see, and it's also the same with learning and training. I don't know if you have seen that, but the next generation coming, they are really they have other, so to say, reference frames in different things. It was an example from the schools. They can't cut out a piece of fabric. When they do it, they can cut out it, but it's not straight. I mean, when we think about cut out a piece of fabric, it's really straight and so, but it wasn't. And we say, okay, that was not the good work. But maybe this girl, she was 11 years old. She thought it was perfect because she had done the task. She has cut up this piece of fabric. And this is something we need to take with us, because soon they also are coming into our business. And how should we have our trainings and so on to meet their needs? So I mean, the whole time, we can never be lazy cats. We all the time need to think about to see what kind of people do we meet, and also regarding inclusion and diversity and all such kind of things. So it's really fun now. We really need to think about all this part and how can we meet the needs they have, so to say.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. So let's open it. Does anybody want to share anything that you're seeing within your organization or within your view that's changing? Yeah, maybe hand up and then Mattia will bring you off, but we're going to have time to go to 2 or 3 people, I think. So anything you want to share or any question you want to ask, please go ahead. We've also got 1 and 2 in the chat, I think.
Yeah, we have first one in the chat from Brian Erickson asking to the speakers, do you believe that nuclear sector is better or worse to attract and retain talent than other industrial sectors? Yeah,
good question. I don't have the data on that. I'm not sure where that data might exist. You might get that somewhere if there's a general organization or maybe a union that's working across different sectors that might have that. Just anecdotal, and my experiences in the nuclear sector, it seems that the nuclear sector now is very good at attracting people, and it's becoming less good at retaining. But I think in the past, people stayed for so long, it's never been a hire and fire. So how do you compare? I don't know. I mean, Camilla, do you have any reference points there?
No, not really. I mean, it is a challenge, of course, if you take a look at salaries and such kind of things, if we talk some competences within IT and so, because they are really popular in a lot of sectors. So, I mean, it's really popular to start in nuclear because you have a very good onboarding often, intro programs and so on. But then it can be challenges to keep those people for a long term. But how it's compared to other sectors, I don't know. But one thing we have been talking about is that it's our wish to, on the national level, go for more validation. So it's more easy to move between sectors because a lot of competences are similar in life science and nuclear and so on, other process industries. So if we have for more operative roles, a kind of validation today that is growing, but I think we need to have a bigger scope of that because then it will be more easy, and then you can add on the nuclear part, for example. So I think we need to work more in that way to succeed in the future.
Yeah, that's Camilla.
Yeah, Callum, may I forward this same question also to Caterina, as Ansaldo also is manufacturing company working in different sectors, not only in the nuclear one. If they see a different approach, attractiveness between the different departments they have.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
please.
Okay. Good afternoon. Consider that in Italy we're living really specific situation and strange period because after 30, maybe almost 40 years, we are considering maybe this time really to go back to nuclear, and the new generation for the very first time see the nuclear power, the nuclear technology as an opportunity for environmental transition and sustainable energy creation, energy production. So I work in this sector since 2001, and really the world has changed in Italy. So it's quite difficult to make comparisons. What I can say now, if I compare Ansaldo Energia and Ansaldo Nucleare, is that Ansaldo Energia, is working on the, let's say, conventional power generation. So our product are gas turbines, steam turbines, and power plants based on fossil fuel. And what we see is that the technology in itself is very interesting and more, let me say, fascinating than others that we handle with at present. So this is a plus in the nuclear field. The specific situation in Italy is that we have a lack of skills on this. So those who have skills in the nuclear field have a huge job market and can go away and ask more each time they want, I say. So this is another point. So at present, yes, we see maybe some, the dynamics in the nuclear field is more fuzzy than in the conventional one. But at the same time, we have something to leverage on, which is a really high level of interest and engagement, and also interest in being trained and work in that sector. So this is a different point. One point, I don't want to interrupt people who were waiting to talk, but to me it was quite interesting, the point about the coming back to the office in presence towards the smart working. And if I understood, this doesn't seem to affect very much the stability in the job relationship. So even if people would like to have more smart working, and many big technology companies are asking people to go back to the office, I didn't understand correctly if this is affecting or not the mobility and the level of turnover that they are having. So I can wait for the answer, of course, if somebody is waiting to talk, but this is interesting to me.
Yeah, thanks, Caterina. Let's come back to that question. I think we have a hand up. We have a hand up from Sharifa. Shall we go to her, Mattia?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, Sharifa sent also the text in the Q&A, so I can read it as well. So she's asking also concerning your comment on the large aging workforce and new intakes. As we need to retain the knowledge and experience, it is critical to extend the retirement age, as these older employers and years of experience. Sorry, I'm receiving years of experience that is key to be shared and transferred to the younger ones. So it's a comment also, I think, on the importance. I don't know if Sharifa, you want to add something more. I'm muting you now, please.
I think Sharifa, you can unmute yourself now, I think.
Yes. Okay, we can hear you, Sharifa.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Metodani and Callum and Camilla. I'd like just to make two recommendations. One, Callum, because you mentioned about now there's a shift, so we have to look at it in terms of the whole ecosystem. So you mentioned about new attitudes, new infrastructure. Camilla, you mentioned about new technologies like AI can help in the training. So I think now we should also add with new policies. That means extending the retirement age of these very experienced staff. We cannot just let them go at 50 years old and bring in the new team with really not much experience. So these are the new ecosystem we have to look into. Second, Camilla, you mentioned about the need for leadership. And I've always at IAEA HR conferences said that the IAEA has very good management courses, but now I think very important to introduce leadership courses. In fact, I visited WNA in London and spoke to Patricia Whelan that in addition to the 6 weeks Summer Institute, they should introduce a leadership course. I recommended in 2018. A few years later, WNU introduced this leadership executive program. So I think it's very important not only to look at the youngest staff, entry level, mid level, but also look at the senior level and board to have specific targeted courses for them. And thirdly, and lastly, Callum, because you're a strong ally for women, can I please recommend that you help me bring this proposal to the WNA for summer to bring it to IAEA, because the Director General has introduced it, fellowship for women graduate. Then they have the visit to the Nucleare Institute. If we could also add one more to make sure there is a 30% of women in senior management and 30% on board of nuclear organizations, R&D institutes, nuclear power plants, whatever. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sharifa. There's some really good points raised there, and I can also see more questions coming in on the chat. So I think we're not going to be able to answer all the questions today. So what we will commit to is coming back to the whole attendees with answers to the questions that we don't answer. But maybe just to finish off, there's a question in the chat, and it's also you raised, Sharifa, about basically not letting people retire. So there's probably a more eloquent way of saying it than that, but that's the reality. And there's a question from Alessandro as well on the text. You know, is there a coordinated strategy to find experienced people, including retired people? This is a huge opportunity. This is a new demographic. The 60 to 80-year-old who is in great health and really wants to contribute and carry on working, that demographic has never existed before now. So we're the first generation to have that demographic, and the workforce is not ready for them. And there's an opportunity to actually coordinate and actually create an offering to create working opportunities that actually work for these people in this demographic. So yeah, they could do a whole webinar on that. But okay, let's move to the next topic. What measures can be taken when recruiting to improve the chances of long-term retention in the people of the people hired? So I'd just like to start by saying a few words. I'm going to be quite brief because we've got so many people wanting to contribute. I want to maximize that. But the way I look at this is, why do people leave their jobs now? And you know, my colleagues and I, there's about 50, 60 of us within Thomas Thor, and day in, day out, we're speaking to people that are looking to move to a different role. And so we have in-depth information about why people are leaving jobs. So let me just give you a few of those insights. One of the main reasons is the employer is not delivering on commitments or promises that were made when I joined. That's what people say. So this could be around the content of the role. It could be around flexibility, remote working. It could be around progression criteria, promotion criteria, or commitments made to training and development. It's those kind of things. But it's so common. It's like, well, people say things like, I wouldn't mind if they had said it might take time or it could be difficult, but I got the impression that I was going to get this or do that, and it didn't happen. That really sits with people, and sometimes they live with it for 6 months or a year or 2 years, but then they leave. And so how to mitigate that? I mean, having a clear job description is obviously a starting point, but then sort of being very careful in the hiring process to make a written log of what is committed and what cannot be committed. I think it's when we're hiring, we are very, very careful to manage expectations and say to someone, okay, if you join this company in this role, these things are certain, but these things are not. You know, we cannot control how fast the team will grow and how fast you move into management. We cannot control the speed of the project and when the investment decision will be made. And I think too many times in the hiring process, it said, okay, we'll discuss that later, or we'll handle that later. And the employer comes away thinking, we'll deal with that later. The employee comes away thinking, okay, this is going to happen. I'll just wait for the update, and it doesn't happen. So it's that mismanagement of expectations. And another big reason people leave roles is the relationship with the line manager. Number one, people normally leave a manager, not an organization. And so supporting line managers with assessment and selection, interviewing skills, and actually involving them in the interview process, and helping anyone who's managing people should understand what their style is and what kind of people they work well with. But that it's not always possible, of course, but helping line managers understand that you need to build a relationship with people in your team. Other reasons people leave, it could be delays in projects or work streams. And again, that's about managing expectations and not setting false promises. It could be around lack of visibility on career progression. And again, it's around managing expectations, but also having joint ownership. So it's not really the employer's role to own the development plan for the person. It's a joint role, and getting that set. And a general one around lack of support. And I do lots of work with the young generation, and I always recommend that people find their own mentors, for example. Don't rely on being given a mentor or waiting. Find people to support you in your own career development. So these are some of the reasons people are leaving, and some of the things that can be addressed at the recruitment stage to improve longer term retention. Maybe Camilla, would you want to comment on things that you're doing when recruiting to try and enhance that long-term commitment of people staying with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to say that we say that it's both a strategic and a human-centered approach when you recruit people. I mean, we really need to be transparent about the culture we have at the company, what kind of expectation, ways of working, how many days a week should you be at the office, and so on. So it must be a really transparent process. And also the onboarding is really important. I mean, the first 3 to 6 months is really critical, I would like to say, for retention. I mean, how fast will you go into the business, and also how fast do you build the network? Who should you call if you have problems with something, and have a good mentor and so on. And some things we have noticed is to have a network is really, really good. And that's something new. We hire more and more groups today than before, and it's really good. Both it's more effective for the line functions, but also for having the network, the support, and so inside this group, and no questions is silly and so on. So that is really good, we think. And also that we don't work so often with, I would like to say, but it's something we think it's very important. It's call it now stay interviews, and that is more, I mean, to have the feedback and so on is important, but also to have more reflection conversations, I would like to say. Okay, what feels good, what feels not good, where, I mean, you have the yearly performance, but anyway, I mean, how is it working, and so on, because it's sometimes a lot under the surface that you never see, or you see too late. I mean, we have the exit interviews, but then it's a little bit too late to just know, okay, you didn't feel included, for example. It's a little bit too late. So that is things we work with, and thoughts we have, and also the career paths early is, of course, really important. And we have also trainee programs and so on, and that is really people love those programs, because there you have the attention, and you got the good onboarding and so on. So we are thinking a lot, okay, how can we have the same way of working in the ordinary line business, so to say, so you feel really welcomed and so on, and have a good introduction. So I think that is really important to have people staying for long-term retention. And also the big projects I will mention, because before it was a little bit like, okay, you haven't worked here 5 years, so you can't be in that project. You really need to be skilled and so on in these areas. But now we are much better in putting in new people into the projects very early. And sometimes we also have a very good example. So a young girl, she's project leader for one of our bigger projects we have. And she's doing it so well, and she has new view of things, how to do and so on. She's really good to coordinator and so on. And she, of course, she doesn't have the deep skills in the different areas, but she doesn't need to, because she listens in and so on. So it's a new ways to work also, to have this development of our employees, so to say.
Yeah, thanks Camilla. So there's, great stuff there. I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, the transparency in the process, you're talking about the importance of the first 3 to 6 months, when some of those promises are made, and when expectations can be managed, the networks to give people formal and informal support. You mentioned others. The stay interviews are a great idea. We all hear about exit interviews, but by then it's too late to kind of change the course for that person. So okay, great. Does any questions, Matteo? Anyone got their hand up wanting to add anything?
Well, I see a comment, in line with what also Camilla and you, Callum, said from Carlo Parise in the Q&A section. Carlo thinks also that more transparency is required in the hiring process, and also in the salary field too, because, I mean, clearing the internal regulation when people are totally onboarded may bring, of course, a feeling of being cheated or promise not maintained from the the hiring company. And we have also one comment in the chat from Matesh Roland asking how can nuclear be sexy or appealing on the labor force market, considering technology from the 70s with shift work and with a must for constant learning. According to Matesh, yeah, the HR branding is not far enough. And yeah, just looking for a comment from you.
Yeah, I can comment on that one. We are thinking about that, of course. And I mean, here it's really important if you have people coming in that don't know this old technique, that they still have their, so to say, certificates for newer techniques. So you really need to have this constant development of these people. And if you succeed with that, I mean, many times they think it's really fun to work with also this old technique. It's a little bit different and what they may be used to and so on. But it's all the time you really need to have so they can have the competence, so to say, fresh, so they can go somewhere else if they want to. So it's a balance here, and that you can do to participate in other kind of projects and then work a little bit with the older techniques and so on. So you really have to plan this in a good way. But of course it's a little bit challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's a good question. Maybe you could look at some of the awareness campaigns. There's one in the UK called Destination Nuclear. So if you Google Destination Nuclear UK, you'll find their website. There's one in US called Nuclear Works, which is run by the NEI. So and you can see how they're doing it. And it's around, often the message is around, it's purposeful. What people want now is real purposeful work, and working on energy security and clean energy is extremely purposeful, and that's a big appealing aspect. And then there's things like the technology. There's loads of robotics going on. These are mega projects which are super complex. You're working in an international environment, multinational, multicultural stakeholders. This is what many people want at the moment. So I think the reality is it is appealing, but it's a bit disconnected maybe with the perception because of the because of maybe the slightly old-fashioned nature of the nuclear sector. But if you look at some of the SMR and advanced reactor companies, these are climate tech companies. These are not energy or nuclear companies. They're climate tech, and that is quite a different proposition to some of the traditional positioning of the sector. So okay, Mattia, I think we need to move on to the next topic, if that's okay. Time goes very quickly. So which inclusion and diversity initiatives are succeeding, and how to boost retention when hiring people from underrepresented and minority groups? Actually, this question was rephrased because before we were going to talk about why they're failing, and I've rephrased the question in a positive way about why some are succeeding. But the reality is that there is, the progress is slow in general across the world, not just in nuclear, actually, in other sectors as well. Some of the reasons that we see in that are probably the main one is the consistency in investment or focus or time or resources. A lot of the initiatives for inclusion and diversity, they start with a lot of energy and then they stop 6 months, 12 months later because something else becomes more important or because the resources run out. And it's that lack of consistency that is sometimes causing challenges. A lot of focus on attraction, like how do we reach these underrepresented groups? How do we interview them? How do we bring them into the organization? So 80% of the work goes into that, and then only 20% of the work, this is my observation, that only a smaller proportion of the work goes into how do we make them feel included. I think, Camilla, you've got the networks within Vattenfall. When you have a big workforce, it's an amazing support mechanism for people coming in to meet others from underrepresented groups, but you can speak about that in a minute. Another massive success factor is the buy-in of individual managers. There's so many organizations. The CEO is an incredible advocate for inclusion and diversity. The policies are perfect. The wording is exceptional. HR are 100% on board. Some of the role models from underrepresented groups, some of the women in the organization, or some of the people from different countries or cultures, or people with disabilities, are great advocates. But 95% of the line managers have been missed in the education, and the people working in their teams don't feel the the power that you might get from a CEO giving the presentation on how important it is to the organization. So it's that the lived experience of the person in a team, whether it's 2 people in a team or 20, that's what makes the inclusion initiative succeed. It's not easy, and measuring success is also not that easy. But the organizations that are measuring are the ones that are succeeding. But it's not just measuring; it's also being bold. Nobody wants to talk about when a diversity or inclusion initiative is failing. It's scary to talk about it, but there are certain targets out there, like representation of women in the workforce, and they're being missed. These are national targets that were launched with huge fanfare in certain countries or regions, and as soon as it's behind schedule, no one talks about it. So what happens next time you set a target or a goal? Somewhere in the back of people's minds, they think, well, if this doesn't happen, it will just go away off the radar again. And that's really damaging. If when we set a target publicly within the organization or nationally, we should be held accountable, and we should stand up if it's not working and take the heat. And we don't in inclusion and diversity initiatives in general, and we should. But there's some amazing work going on here. And Camilla, in Vattenfall, what's your experience with what's working and maybe what's not?
I mean, I recognize a lot of what you say, and I would like to say that if you have diversity metrics, it's not enough. You need to invest in inclusion or cultural change, otherwise it will not succeed. And you also need to have a clear ownership and accountability, and also thoughts that one size doesn't fit all, for example. And also the job ads, how do we write them with an inclusive language, for example? And another things we have seen also, how can we create feedback channels? How can we give the feedback and feel secure when we do it? So the thing we are doing 2 initiatives right now. One is a workplace harassment. It's how we take a proactive zero tolerance approach, would like to say. And this is both an e-learning and then a workshop. And this is to focus on prevention and concrete action. So everyone at BA Generation, that is nuclear and hydro, is doing this. And the other thing that the whole Vattenfall do is license to hire, and that is how you as a manager should hire. What should you think about? That inclusion is key in recruitment. We need to have diverse teams because then you also perform better. So we call it inclusive hiring. It's removing unintentional exclusion, would like to say. So we will want to have it as a fair process that benefit both people and performance. So these 2 initiatives we are running right now, and it's been very well taken from the organization, and everyone thinks this is really important and so on. And of course we have also from before, I mean, a lot of what you call in English principles, so to say, regarding this, but this is an extra thing we are doing because we think this is so important, and we think we need to make the organization more mature in these areas.
Yeah, thank you, Camilla. I think that's such a great example. Like you need a license to drive a car, you need a license to operate a nuclear power plant, but you don't need a license to manage people. But that's a really serious job, and
it is.
And I wish management of people, responsibility for people were better kind of regulated, so that having it is something you can do. You don't need to wait for a law on that in an organization. Having a license to hire, I think, is a fantastic idea. You know how to interview, you know how to build a culture, you know how to create psychological safety. There's some basics here, so I think Yeah, it's fantastic. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Any other questions, Mattia, or anyone else would like to speak?
There are no questions so far on this specific topic, Callum.
Okay, I see one more coming in the chat on a slightly different topic, but it's given the high projected retirement rate, what are the effective strategies to ensure knowledge and experience transfer? I was going to say, will that come into our fourth question? I'm just trying to think. No, I think let's come back to it because it might be touched on in this next question. So let's go to our fourth and final area. So this is a collection of people from different countries, different organizations. I see on this webinar, there's people from outside of Europe as well, which is amazing. But what are the opportunities for collaboration at the European level, or let's say the international level, to attract and retain the workforce? And what are the limitations to collaboration? So what are the kind of things that, there are some things that are better done at the team level, some things are better done at the department or the organization level, some things are better done in partnership with other organizations, some things regionally, some things nationally, and then some things internationally. And so let's think now about what are the things that work on an international level or could work. Just a few examples to get us started. I think awareness campaigns are something that could work on an international level. The economy of scale for grouping together for communications. There's so much information out there now, so much messaging. To have a coordinated approach internationally about, we had the question earlier on, what are we doing to make nuclear industry more appealing or more attractive to work in, and to raise awareness. So if we did, joined up awareness campaigns amongst, let's say, the European Nuclear Society members or WNA members or IAEA countries, would make a much bigger impact. Limitations, of course, there, differences in messaging. It's interesting, in the UK, the Destination Nuclear initiative was joint between civil nuclear and defence. And that's a topic that not everyone would agree with the decision made there. Some think the two should be separate, but ultimately there is a crossover with the workforce. So agreeing, the messaging and who the stakeholders are to be included, is something to deal with. But some kind of awareness campaign at the European or even the global level would be a great opportunity. There's a big opportunity around gathering data and analysing data. We don't have accurate information on how many people are in the sector. We have different ways of counting people: direct employees, indirect employees, supply chain employees that work part of the time in nuclear, people that are nuclear specific, and then those that are engineers or project people that could work in any industry. So some kind of collaboration on data. What are we gathering? And let's try and agree on how we're counting types of jobs or types of people would be really, really useful, because then with data we can then justify actions. One that I think would be such a great idea would be to have some kind of European secondment program. That so many people leave their jobs because the project's not happening yet, or things aren't moving as quickly as I'd like, or I just need a change. And if we had a smooth secondment culture within nuclear, where you could go for a couple of years to another organization, you could go and get experience on a project and then come back to your home country or home organization. There are some organizations that do this, maybe within a group environment. You have 5 companies in a group and they do that within the group, or some R&D organizations do this. But we would save a lot more people leaving the sector if we had this joined up secondment program. And I think that could be a great idea for the nuclear sector. But it needs to be run properly. It would take time and resources to set up. So something to think about, maybe. So just a few ideas on the kind of things that collaboration could work. But normally in nuclear, we're good at coming up with ideas, but it's the implementation that's tricky because everyone's busy. But Camilla, what do you see as the opportunities for collaboration, and what would Vattenfall collaborate with? Which areas?
Yeah, I think the suggestions you have sounds really good. Today we collaborate with Finland. We have the trainee program together with Finland, and we also have an executive leadership program together with Finland, and that works really well, I would like to say. So, I mean, there it could be a Europe trainee program, for example, and also something else. I'm thinking about when you have this niche capabilities. I mean, maybe there we could build some competence together. As you said, in Europe, you can work in different projects and so on. And then also knowledge and best practice sharing, maybe what we're doing today also, but I mean, maybe we can be even better at doing that. So I believe in working in the bigger picture. I think that is really good for the future.
Yeah, it's interesting around training, because I hear often that there is a need for some more structured training within nuclear, but then a lot of countries have their own organizations doing this, and I know there are some great collaborations going on at the European level, but there seems to be some opportunity there to do more, and maybe we see that developing in the coming years as the opportunity picks up. Okay. Mattia, any questions, or anyone with a hand up? Anyone want to make any comments? We're approaching the end, so any topics or any comments or any questions would be welcome.
Not now, but there was one actually linked also to your comments at the beginning, introducing this topic, and it's related to. It's a question from William Vaughan, if you see any difference between the recruitment for paper or theoretical projects and those with greater certainty of build or actual operating plans. That's actually linked also to some of the content that could impact the attractiveness in general of the talent procedures.
Yeah, I mean, there's a short answer to that. It makes a huge difference. If someone is thinking about joining the sector and they've seen projects start and then stop, it's a big concern. So if the investment decision hasn't been made, I think that the single thing that would make the biggest difference to building the workforce would be more certainty on the longer term, because we talk about how certain the opportunities are and how much work there is in nuclear, but the reality is the project timelines are not predictable and some projects have stopped. So that's the reality. So it makes an immense difference is the answer. Yeah. Okay, so we promised to finish on time. Sharifa, I know you have your hand up as well, but maybe if you wouldn't mind just putting it into the chat. We haven't managed to get to everyone's questions, but we promise we will provide a summary of answers to some of the questions we couldn't reach. But Camilla, any final words from you?
No, I thank you for letting me being here and talking about our experiences, and it's really interesting period we're in, and together we will make it, I think. So a lot of knowledge here.
Well, thank you, and then a special thanks to Callum and to Camilla for leading this conversation, to all the participants for their very active engagement with their question. As Callum said, we promise to be back to you answering those questions that are still pending. From me and from the European Nuclear Society, again, huge thanks to everybody. I want just to remind you that this webinar has been recorded and will be soon published to the YouTube and social media channels of the European Nuclear Society. And we invite you to follow us also for the upcoming webinars. And as said, stay tuned as we will back to you with the answers to your question. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again. Thank you, Callum. Thank you, Camilla.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.